So I received a comment on my last video asking about the router table that I was using. And this kind of caught me by surprise because that table is quite literally a board with a hole in it that I clamped to the side of my bench. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, it might be kind of interesting for me to talk about my router table solutions because they are all basic, cheap, simple homemade things. Nothing complicated. I don't have a commercial table. I don't have a router lift or a tilting, anything. Basic, simple, cheap, homemade tables. So this is my main router table. I made this like 9 years ago. There's an article on my website that I wrote when I built it. I called it the Disposable Router Table. Not because I had any plans of throwing it away, but I built it out of a sheet of 1/2-inch MDF, 2 foot by 4 foot, some plywood scraps in the shop, a bit of electrical cord. It cost like 20 bucks. And I'm like, for 20 bucks, I can build this, I can try it out, I can see what I like and don't like about it. And you know, if I throw it out and move on to another thing, it's no big deal. That's why I called it the Disposable Router Table. But 9 years later, I've still got it. The top is 18 by 24. It's got an 1 5/8 hole in the middle. There's no fancy inserts or anything. It's just an 1 5/8 hole. There's an overhang all the way around the top, so I can just clamp things to it anywhere I need to. The top is sort of a modified torsion box with a section cut out where the router is bolted to the bottom of the MDF. I took an extension cord and I cut it and wired it into the switch. The router is plugged into the extension cord. Then you can control the router just with a simple off-on switch. So there's no micro adjust. If I want to adjust the bit height, I just reach under, pop the clamp, and I adjust it up or down. If I want to take the motor, if I want to change the bit, I just take the motor out, put it on top. The router is just a basic Porter cable 690 that fits into a fixed base. The fence is pretty basic also, just some boards connected at a right angle. There's a hole in it where the bit fits through. I have a 1/4-inch piece of plywood that serves sort of as the face on the fence, and that gives me a spot where I can sort of make it a zero clearance for the bit. I mean, if I need to, I can just cut this bigger. I can take this off when I need to because the actual hole in the fence is quite large. On the back, the blocks are close enough together that I can wedge in the dust collector hose, so it gets really good dust collection. The fence is just clamped into place. No micro adjust. Just tap it with a hammer if I need to do a little bit of micro adjusting. You know. So it's a pretty basic, humble router table, but it's worked fine for 9 years for a hobbyist who is not in here every day and is not trying to make a living in the shop. I mean, you can handle a few things that slow you down or need a little fiddling when you're a hobbyist. I'm not saying it's always going to be like this. I'm sure a router lift would be neat, or a tilting router table might be neat. I might do one of those next year or 5 years from now. I don't know. But for my needs, this has worked well for 9 years. So what about this board with the hole? So why did I make this if I've got this router table? Well, 1 5/8 hole, 2 1/4 hole. I happen to get a 2-inch roundover bit, and that wouldn't fit in here, and really, to me, a 2-inch bit is kind of too big to put into a Porter cable 690 because it doesn't have variable speed. So I drilled a hole in a piece of plywood. I countersunk some holes that match my big plunge router, which does have variable speed, and then I just clamped it to the bench. I don't have a fence, I don't have any dust collection, so you know, if you were doing this all the time, that would be no good, but for an operation that you do maybe once a year, it's fine. I'm curious as to just if it's that level, because it is a fairly heavy router, but considering that it's just a basic piece of 3/4 inch plywood, it's pretty flat. For if I would leave it here, it'd probably sag over time because there's no extra support, but this is meant to be a temporary single-use sort of thing. And so there you have it. There's a quick tour of my 2 ultra cheap, ultra low end router table solutions. You too can have a router table. In fact, you can have 2 router tables for about $25 in materials, not counting the routers. And as always, I'd like to thank you for stopping by and spending some time in my shop today. I hope you found it interesting and enjoyable. If you feel I've earned it, please consider subscribing. and we'll see you next time. That was good, except that little bit at the end. Take 7, I don't know.